Hi everybody, Kat here. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to work on a painting something like this. This is something I did a while back and I would like to try to teach you how to do it. It is not necessarily beginner, but it's not really that difficult. It just kind of looks busy. But for time's sake, what I've done is I have made cutouts out of contact paper, clear contact paper, and then I stuck them onto my painting here, and I just drew a rough sketch. Now, for those of you who don't like to draw or want to draw something a little differently, that's fine. But if you don't like to draw, at the end of this video, I'm going to put up a still clip of the drawing that I made, and you can take a screenshot of it and then crop it and then use it to trace right off your computer if you like. So let's get started. So for the sky, I'm going to choose Payne's Gray, and I would like it to fade out from the moon and get darker as we get farther away from the moon. And so I'm going to just wet my paper with the Payne's Gray. I don't have to use just clear water because I'm going to be putting Payne's Gray in it anyway. So as I've said, I use contact paper cutouts. You can kind of see my drawing. And that's so that I can do all this quite carefree. I don't have to paint around stuff. On this painting, I did cut around with my hand. I didn't wet all those areas. So for this one, I'm going straight in. I don't have to worry about covering up that moon because it's kind of masked off. If you have masking fluid, you can also use that. Masking fluid and I have a tough relationship. I love what it does, but I have such rotten luck with it sometimes. And I've tried quite a few different kinds. So I'm coming in with the same Payne's Gray, and I want it to be darker, the farther away from the moon we get. So this side I'd like it to be darker, and on top. And because the paper is already wet here, it's going to kind of fade out all on its own, but I'm going to help it a bit. This is my Dollarama paper. If you're using cotton paper, you'll get even better results. I'm still going to go in with a bit more Payne's Gray, like thicker, and I'm going to drop it in here. Because watercolor dries lighter, so you always try to go in a little darker than you intend it to be. Okay. All right. So I'm going to rinse my brush, and I would like to add a little smidge of purple into my sky. So I'm going into my purple, and I'm watering it down, but I'm very careful not to make a bloom. I don't want to make a bloom. So I'm going to dab my brush on a paper towel like that, and I'm going to go in right around here with the purple. And this does not have to be perfect, folks. It's a fun Halloween painting. So I rinsed my brush, I dried it off quite a bit, and now I'm just trying to smooth this out. If you have cotton paper, this will smooth out a lot easier on its own. I'm going in with a bit more purple over by the side here of the moon, and I'm going to dab off my brush, especially in the belly. That's where all the water is held. So I'm going to just put a nice little stripe of purple right there. Or I tried to anyway. And I'm going to dry my brush like that, and I'm just going to gently kiss the edge of that paint so that it just fades off like that. So as you can see here, this is a little bit, there's a line here, but you know what? This is the first layer, so don't stress about it. In addition to this purple, I would like to add a little bit of yellow. I'm going to add lemon yellow, but because lemon yellow and blue make green, I want to be very careful about how I do this. I don't want to mix it, so I'm using a bit of lemon yellow on my brush. My brush is just damp. It's not too watery, just in case it is. And I'm just going to brush lightly. I'm going to dab it on. I do not want to brush because it's, you see, you can already kind of see green. So just dab that off a little bit. And I'm going to put some around here and over here. I just want to give the impression that the moon's casting a bit of a yellowy glow off of it. Okay. Now, I could fiddle more, and I'm dying to get in there and fiddle more, but this is the biggest lesson when you're doing watercolor, and that is to stop fiddling with it. Don't touch it while it's wet. I will go in and I'll fix this later, because I tried to do that here, and I stopped myself, and look, it turned out just fine. So try to resist like saying, ooh, that line's not perfect, I have to fix it. Now, okay, so now what we're gonna do is, this is kind of a, I don't know, I just made it a little grassy hill with a path. I drew it out very lightly on my painting, but in the drawing you can see it clearly. So it's a little tiny bit uphill, and there's a couple of little ghosts. So I'm going to start with the grass up here. There is a tree here, but it doesn't matter because that thing is going to be really dark, so it's going to cover up whatever we paint here. So I'm going to go in with my nice juicy brush again. It's about a size 8, I'd say. And what I want to do is get the darkest part of my path will be down here because it's the farthest away from the moon. So I'm going to come down here, and if you can see my drawing, the path is right there and right there. So I'm going to go and I'm going to get a nice brown that I quite like. I'm just throwing it on top of the purple that was in there. Maybe I could add some of this brown too, because we are going in dark on the bottom. This is not our final layer, but it's just to start. Okay, add a bit of water. That doesn't look too dark to you, does it? There. So I'm going right over. That's the good thing about mask. I can paint right over as if these ghosts and pumpkins aren't there. Now I want to make sure the darkest part is facing downwards, down at the bottom. Up here, I want it to be lighter, so I'm going to turn my work again. And I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to go in with a much paler version, and I'm going to even add a tiny bit of yellow ochre at the top here, because the path is going to be kind of glowing up here because of the moonlight. So that full brown color is not going to be showing. It's going to look a lot lighter up here because of the moonlight. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. I know we can get fiddly and stuff, but this is a fun painting. This is just a fun Halloween painting. Someone requested a Halloween painting, and I appreciate your comments, guys. I really love them. So I decided to do, I have another one after this too, I think I'm going to be working on. It takes so long to upload to YouTube the videos that are long. I'm astonished at how long it takes. Okay, I'm going to go and find a nice green, and I want it to be darker down here. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix one. So I'm going to go in with, this is called like a hunter's green. So this is sort of a little bit artificial bright. It's like a bluey green. So what do you use when you're cutting green? You can use some red. So I'm going to just dab into my red. I don't know if I like that. I think I'm going to go get some yellow, because I've already used yellow, so yellow's a good color for me. Okay, yellow. Well, that's a nice green. But I need it to be darker. I want it to be a deeper one, but I don't have to go in all at the same time. So That's a lesson, you know, I should know better. So I'm just going to add this. Maybe I can add a bit of that brown. Oh yeah, that I like. See, I don't like these fake colors. I like the ones that are a little more neutralized and they look more natural. So I'm going to go right down at the bottom and along the edge of the path. Sorry. I hope it's not shiny for you guys. I really worry about that. Okay. And I'm going to come up here. And as with the path, things are going to be darker down at the bottom. So we're going to add a bit of water to our brush without drying it off. And we're just going to add some water to that color. Okay. So then I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to rinse my brush out really well. I've got some pale green here. And I'm going to come up here. And I'm going to try and blend this in with the dark. Now that's a bit too light, but now we can play with this. So I'm just adding some darks up here to make it look like the moonlight is glowing on some of the grass and it's not on other parts of the grass. I don't know, whoops. I did this a while ago, so I'm not sure quite what I used, but I don't know if you can see it here. It's a little bit messy, you know, it was just a fun kind of planning. I was trying to plan something out. And so that's what I did up here, and it ended up looking okay. So we're just going to, oh, look at that. That's a cauliflower because I must have dropped a blob of water there. So I'm going to sop it up very gently, and I'm going to add a bit more green in there. And hopefully I caught it early enough. And what am I doing? I'm fiddling while it's wet. This should be illegal. So there, and now I'm gonna do this side. So let's see if we start with the light, how that goes. So I'm gonna start with the light up here. Make sure it's nice and wet. It's not gonna dry that bright. I'm gonna turn my work around and I'm gonna do it darker down here. So I'm gonna go in and get a little bit more of that. Oh, I chose the wrong green. Boy, I do that all the time, don't I? I'm going to take a bit of brown. Yeah, I like that. And I'm going to come down here. Actually, I like that color for down here too. Which I shouldn't be touching. Somebody taught me. Okay. Wet my brush. And in this case, I've got such a small area to drag this color out onto. I did dry my brush a little bit. There we go. Okay. So I am going to try not to fill with this too much. I'm just trying to smooth over what I did. I added a bit too much water. But you see, these are things you're going to learn as you go along. And they happen to everybody. Doesn't matter if you've been painting for 100 years. It's going to happen to you. Okay, so let's leave this for now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go and dry my work with a hair dryer on low wind, on the lowest setting possible, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now that it's all dry, I'm going to fix this sky because it dried streaky. And this is something that it's my fault, and it's also the paper. So I'm going to wet the whole thing again. I know it sounds counterintuitive to dry something with your hairdryer and then only to wet the whole thing. But if you don't do that, you're going to make blooms and unwanted marks in your painting. Okay, so I'm going to go back in with a light layer of my Payne's Gray. This paper dries very, very, very quickly. Okay. Softening this line here. I'm going to go in with a tiny bit more of that mauve or purple I'm just putting a lot of water in it. But I'm also being careful not to have a sopping, dripping wet brush because it's going to make cauliflowers. And this side of the purple, I think I like it well enough. And I'm going to add a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of Payne's Gray around here at the bottom. Because you do want it to look as though the farther away from the moon you are, the darker it gets. Okay. Okay, so I think that's an improvement. We will see when it dries. Now, I'm not going to do the large tree just yet because I just re-wet the sky. But there are some trees and shrubbery in the background that I do want to put in while that paper is wet. So I am getting my, a fairly small pointy brush. This one, it says it's a size 4, but to me that's more like a 2 or a 3 in most sets. Use what you're comfortable with. And I'm going to the Payne's Gray that's already in my palette here. I'm going to add some black. I'm going to put it over on the side and I'm going to just add it in. So it ends up like a bluey gray. And you do want it fairly watery, not drippy watery, but I guess kind of like, if you're comparing it to milk, yeah, I would say it's like a 1%, 2% milk. Okay, so I'm just going to go up with very skinny lines and just tickle the paper because this is going to blur out and that's what we want. We want this to blur out because it's in the distance and it's just like a little creepy effect, that we want in the painting. And over here, there's more of them. So they're a little thicker. So I'm going to touch the paper. I'm going to push down harder on it. And as I've said in other videos, when you're doing any kind of nature work, the more imperfect your strokes are and the more natural looking it is. And this is still too wet for the large tree right now. So I'm going to work on the foreground here because I didn't re-wet it yet. I will fix this grass, but there's things I want to do first. So this path, we have a pumpkin here and we have a little guy dressed as a ghost. So they're going to cast shadows onto this path. And not only do I want to add the shadows, but I want to make this path look a little dirty and rugged. So I'm going to take a medium-sized brush, I would say. Whoopsie. Not this great big juicy one because it holds a bit too much water. And that's a bit of an accident waiting to happen in my case. So I'm sorry, I have so many brushes that I can't use because in my beginner paintings, I said I was going to use my beginner sets. Okay, this is this is like an angular brush, so I'm going to use that to do the path. So I want to add like some kind of rugged looking effects to this path. So because people walk in the middle of the path, I'm just going to add a little bit of brown to this bluey blacky color that we have going up here. And I'm just going to work with that and see what we end up with. I like to use all the stuff on my palette. Paints are really expensive and I hate wasting them. I watch people waste them all the time. I can't stand it. It really bothers me. So I'm going to come in under this pumpkin. Now the shadow, you see where the moonlight is? So the shadow is going to be right there. Okay, and we can make this look a little differently later. Now, if you had this on an angle, you see where the shadow will be from the ghost. So the darkest will be right under his cloak, and then we'll do that. All right, and then this person is a lot closer to the moon, so the shadow is going to be a lot closer to the little person. Like in this painting, I changed it to a witch instead of a ghost because my background was too pale. You couldn't see that it was a ghost, so I just changed it into a witch. With this, I'm going to leave this. It should be dry in a couple of minutes, but I don't want to go over anything until it is dry. And as for the grasses, this pumpkin is going to be casting a shadow too. So I'm going to take my round brush. I have a small one. I should get a little bit. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, folks. So I'm going to get a little bit bigger. This one says it's a size 8, and that's not a size 8 that I know of. So there's going to be a tree here. So, oh, you know what? Let's do this tree. I think it's okay. So I'm going to get my larger brush. And I'm going to try to get a lot of the water out of it, because you need it wet, but you do not need this much water. Like, I can squeeze this out still. That's how much there is. I want this tree to be a combination of black and Payne's Gray. There we go. This Payne's Gray, like I said, is kind of bluey, so, but I need to mix up enough of it because we're doing a whole tree. So I'm going to start down here by the pumpkin. You see the pumpkin's kind of leaning up against this tree. And I drew a little bit of an outline, but you can't really see it too well. I think I need to dry this brush off a little bit, because the belly, see how much water's in there? So I'm coming up, and I'm going to make a very imperfect looking tree here, guys. You do not want perfection. Even though that's what we always demand of ourselves. We always demand of ourselves this perfection, and really, in this case, you need not stress yourself. It'll look much better if you don't. So as you can see, we still need to wait a while to do the rest, because it is still wet. I'm just adding one more layer onto this, the bottom part. And this will fix later. I don't want to touch it anymore because I know exactly what's going to happen, because I'm using a really big brush. So I don't want to mess with this. Okay. So now you can see between where the tree is and the pumpkin's poking out, that pumpkin's going to make this grass quite dark. So we're going to go in with our dark green. No, that was not. This was the green. And we added it to some brown. I remember. Don't be fussy about the brown. Just get a color that you like to look at. And a bit of that black that we just made. It would be smart to wait for this to dry, but I'm not the most patient person. So you can see where the shadow will be. Now I'm going to soften this out a little bit. So I'm going to give this a dry once again so we can get going on all the other fun stuff. Okay, I'm back. It's dry now. So the last thing we're going to do before removing these stickers or whatever, decals, whatever they are, we're going to mess up this path a little bit. We're gonna add some texture to it. I don't know if you watched another painting I did that had a little messy path. So we're going to add some texture to this path. So I'm mixing some brown and some Payne's Gray. It makes like a nice gray color, actually. The brown takes out the blue, sorry. So very rough, dry. I'm going around this. It's not quite dry enough, but very gently. And change direction. As you see that the path is going this way, change your direction like that. Okay, because it's coming around like that, right? See, like this? So, and then with a very thin brush, which I have misplaced, I have this little liner brush. I'm going to put some of this very dark blacky bluey color that we used for the tree, and I'm just going to put in some tiny little like lines in the walk, so that it looks like it's getting closer and closer here. I think I'm going to do it this way. So the more distance you put between these, the closer it's going to look. So it kind of looks like there might be some stones on this pathway. And they certainly don't have to be straight. They don't have to look realistic. It's just for your viewer to see which direction your path is going in. These I find a bit too dark, but I will try to lighten them later. I don't want to do it right now because they're wet, and you know how it is. You're not supposed to do that. So I'm going to leave this path alone, and I'll work on it again later, see what I come up with. And now I'm going to work on the grasses. I just want to mess this up and make this look a teeny bit less perfect. That brush is too big too. Maybe I can use this guy. Okay, so I'm going in with some green. Now let me see what my olive green would do for this picture. Let's see. Not much, it's not dark enough. So I'm going to go in with the original green I had, and I mixed it with brown, I believe. And you're just going to sort of like drop the paint in here and there, just so it looks a little less even, and it's darker up here, even though the moonlight's there, because it's farther away from us, so we can't see as much detail. And I'm just going to soften this out. This is called flying by the seat of your pants. I used to love all these expressions my relatives, my older relatives had. My grandparents and aunts and uncles. And okay. And down here it's going to be quite dark, but you're going to see more like sort of grasses and stuff because it's closer to you, so you can see more detail. And same with on this side. I just want to add a bit of messiness to the edges here, because grass on a grassy path, sometimes the grass comes right out onto the path. So I think that's good enough for now. The one thing I did forget to do was put a shadow in front of this little guy here. So I'm going to get to that right now, actually, because I don't want to forget. So I'm just taking a bit of that green and mixing a bit of the grayish that we made earlier with that. I hope this isn't too complicated, that the mixing the grays and all that. It's just something you're going to get used to doing. So because the moon's there, the shadow's going to be here. Kind of the same as this pumpkin. See, it's casting it on this side. And we can go in darker later. That's just to get that established. Okay, so now I don't want to touch down here, but here it's still dry, so I'm going to remove my sticker on the moon. On this painting we have some bats up in the trees, up in the moonlight, and I want to put more branches on my trees. They're looking kind of sickly. So with a brush that has a nice tip, I'm going back to this one. I'm going back into this bluey gray color here that we started with earlier when we first did the tree. I'm going to add a little bit more blue to it because these branches are going to be closer to the moon, so they will look a little bit lighter than the branches over here. So from this, we're going to just come in like this, and you're going to draw some branches, or paint, excuse me, with your hand at a 90-degree angle. Now, I bet you can't see that. I'm going to push this over here. I'm going to try doing it this way. I'm going to push down a little heavier because I want the branch thicker here, and come up and be jagged. Don't be gentle with your brush strokes, because branches are pretty rough looking. Okay. So this one's going to come up here. Going to have more branches coming off of it. And you could just do this. You can go do this. You can overdo it. You can underdo it. You can do whatever you like. Whatever you feel like doing. Whatever brings you joy. If it brings you joy, then you do it. Adding more water to my paint because it's a bit dry. When you have a smaller brush, sometimes you need a teeny bit more water because it doesn't hold as much. So I'm going to come down from this branch, create something here, and this one looks a little bald. Nothing wrong with bald, but you know, don't want to offend anybody. I think that's pretty good for now. And on the other side, I'm just going to hint at another tree being over here. I don't want to cover that moon completely because I want my bats to show. So, and these little bushes here are nice and out of focus, which is nice. It's just going to darken the bottom of them a bit. They don't have to be clear, just darkened a bit. So I'm going to add a few more dark. Now I'm going in with jet black to do the parts of the tree that are, the parts of the tree that are recessed. So they're not collecting any light from the moon. So they're going to be quite dark. So I'm going to use some black. Pretty much straight black. And it's a nice creamy consistency. It's a little thinner than cream that you would buy. So I'm coming on to the moon's on the left, so I'm coming on to the right side, and I'm just going to make some lines to imply that there's shadows here. And the more you do these, the better you get, and it's not so scary when you do stuff more often. You see that it really is relaxing. It doesn't matter what people say about your work. I read in a Facebook group, I'm part of a few watercolor groups, and I read some women saying that their husband hates their work, thinks it's a waste of time, and like they're not even talented, so why do they bother? I'm just so shocked when I read them, because I don't really think that that's the purpose of doing art. People have a funny idea about art, about it having to look exactly like if you're painting an apple, it has to look like a photo. Well, why don't you just take a photo then? I don't see how that means someone's not talented, or why do you have to be even talented to enjoy art? Why can't you just enjoy it? And that's what art is all about. Okay, enough preaching. So I'm going to get back. I think I could do these grasses now. I think they're nice and dry. So I'm going to turn my work. And again, I'm going to just add some coloring in here because it looks a little flat to me. And it's at night, but I still want it to look like there's green grass. So I'm just taking a bit of a lighter green to add to this darker murky green that we had. And I'm just going to just gently add some color to this paint. And you do not have to be perfect because this is not exactly in focus, this part of the grass. Just looks green. Your brain tells you it's green. And you know this is grass, right? Just by looking at it. So it doesn't have to look perfect. All you have to remember is that up here, it's got to be lighter than down here. That's all. That's why I'm turning my work, because when you first collect the paint on your brush, you're always going to have more on your first stroke. So again, just going to add a bit of water to that because I didn't have enough. I'm adding a bit more of that light green because I need more mixed. Oops, oh God, did you see what I just did? Oh, sheesh. Okay. I'm glad my mistakes will show you how to fix them. Okay. Now up here, I'm not liking this look up here. Maybe I shouldn't fix it while it's backwards, upside down. I shall do this. Yeah, that's good enough. So what I want to do here is these are casting a small shadow too. I'm just going to get some shadowy color. And all these small little details, they don't seem like much, but they're really important. And that's the difference between, say, a child doing a painting and an adult. Even though your paintings could look like something your kids do, all these little tiny things like shadows, that's what makes the difference in your work. Because you understand shadows and depth, perspective. Okay, so let's stop there. I think I'm going to just leave it dry for a few minutes, and then I'm going to take these off. Oh yeah, I don't have to let you go. Hang on. Let's do the bats. So I'm going to show you a little trick how to draw a bat. I did not draw these out on the paper first, so I'll just show you quickly because it's easy. Oh, you can see that. Yes. So what I do to make sure they're in different directions, I just draw a little oval. Comes out. Okay, I'll do it darker for you. And then I do a rounded point and come down and do another point, just like that. Then I come over to this side, and because it's sideways, we're going to go that way and come that way. And then right before, I don't know if they have little feet, but I make these two little lines here, and then I join with the opposite curve as I did on the top here. So I make a little line, like pretend they're little legs, and from this line to this line, I join it with the opposite curve. And there's your bat. And you don't even have to be that careful about it. You just kind of do that. And when you paint it, it looks like a bat. So you would just change where this oval is. So if this wing is on the other side, on the far side, you can barely see it. And your brain will know that is a bat. Okay, I hope that helps. So I am going to erase these little pencil lines that I have from earlier in my painting. Okay, and I'm going to put a bat right there. See these little guys? So I'm going to do that right in the moonlight. And it doesn't matter if they're bigger than they're supposed to be. Who cares? It's your painting. So I'm going to put one right here. So I'm going to do that little oval. I'm going to do my paint is not wet enough to do this, right? I'm going to do there we go, the little curved lines. And then we're going to do those two little legs and do the opposite curve. And that looks like a bat. We got a bat in our house once. Oh my gosh. I thought that was the end of my life. I thought my life was over. I was so scared. I'll tell you that story one day, but oof. Thought I was going to end up in the hospital. But now that's done, I think this is going to be dry enough that we can get on to this because I don't want this to be too long. What I'm doing is I'm taking a very extremely watery black, and because the moonlight's right over this little person's head, we're going to leave that head white. And then we're going to come down. And this little one might become a witch too, because there. Let's just leave it like that, and we're going to see what happens. Because what you're implying here is that there's parts of this cloak that are catching the light and parts that aren't. So you'll see it better in this cloak. So now we're going to remove this tombstone picture. This little sticker here. And it's the same. This tombstone is kind of like a gray, you know, a dingy gray. It looks a little broken. So what I'll do with the pencil, I'll show you with the pencil first, is it has an edge around it here, like this. And then you can't see the edge on the other side because it's facing away from you. So the first thing you do is you get a bit of that black, that watery black, so it's kind of gray. You just go along this edge. And don't be even about it because it's going to look older. The older, the less even you do it, the older it's going to look. And then I'm going to put two little spooky eyes. Just to make fun because, you know, cemeteries are real things and they're kind of an upsetting place. So if you could just make them sort of fun for Halloween. There we go. Okay, so we'll leave that there in this shape here. I don't want to touch it because I don't want to ruin it. Well, I just did anyway. I'm just wetting this because it's a little bit too white. Okay, but I don't want to go near this face because I don't want to ruin it. So I'm going to come down to, maybe I'll do this ghost. I'll peel that off. But you see on this one, I did not peel anything. I just did not wet where these items were. And as long as this paper stays dry, your other wet paint won't go in there. Unless you have like a huge puddle, but it will not go. Watercolor likes water, doesn't like dry. Okay, so the first layers, as you can see here, there's a few layers of gray. So I'm going to go in with a very light gray and do what I did earlier. So the top of this head is kind of catching the light. And this is farther away. Okay, I'm just adding a bit because it's harder to see. And over here, it's going to be darker because there is no light over here. So I'm just going to take some of this because it's a bit too watery. And I'm going to bring it down and just suggest that there's body shapes under here. Body shapes. There's a shape of a body under here. It's only one body under this ghost costume. Okay, so there's a, like so. There we go. And it does not have to be perfect, folks. Just sort of softening some of these lines. You will soften them again after, so don't worry too much. Okay, we're going to leave that ghost the way it is. So the darkest part of the ghost should be on this side because there's really no light catching it. Okay. Now we're going to go on to a cute little pumpkin here. In my drawing I gave it a face, but on this I did not, so you don't have to do that. I'm going to mix some orange. I'm going to have to clean a spot from my palette with some water here. Water. Isn't this great? This is why I started watercoloring again. When my children were young, I used to paint in acrylic, and I mean it's a mess to clean up. So this was so easy, and I just discovered I kind of liked it. So okay, so now we're on to this yellow, orange pumpkin. So I'm choosing an orange from my palette here, and I don't normally like them very much, the oranges, so I guess it's okay. I'll go in with the first layer with this orange. It's just going to be a watery layer, I'll just do this whole stem and then we'll fix it up later. Now, this part of the pumpkin is the farthest away from the light. Now, because this is fat up here, it's going to catch the moonlight. So I'm going to add, I think I'm going to add a teeny bit of red to this orange here. I sprayed my paints earlier, but okay. And I'm going to drop it in down here. I'm going to take some burnt sienna. It's a little late in the game to add color to it, but I do think that this is a good shadow color for pumpkins. So I'm going to come down and I'm just going to drop it in while it's still wet. Okay, now I'm going to peel this pumpkin off, and this is the final peel. Peel that off. I don't know if you can see, I have pencil marks there, and if you've watched my other videos, you know I hate it. And where the shadow is, it is closest to the tree, because that is farthest away from the moon. So while the paper's wet, I'm going to add my burnt sienna mixture right away instead of the red. And we'll do the lines and everything later, but for now we're just going to get a nice shadow in there. Now, if you don't like this, it's very simple to turn this into a witch, and I will show you how to do that if you like. But this guy, he's almost dry. You know what, for time's sake, I'm just going to go right in and do it anyway. So we're going to get some more gray from the part of the palette where we made some gray. And we're just going to sort of go over some of these, but not the entire part of the shadow. And this is what will give your shadows depth. Going to add some very watery, like some lines coming down here. That is way too much, that's way too dark. So re-wet your brush. And it's darker down here. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to dab this up a bit. I did make a bit of a, but you want it to kind of look like a mess like this. This one, it ended up looking like this little guy was crying. So I'm just going to darken up the top part of the eye holes because there's no light up in there and in the mouth. So then you can see them a bit better. And I'm just going to put a very dark line along the edge. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make this little person a witch. If you don't like, oh yeah, you know what I forgot to do? I just took a very simple black and I painted like a shoe here, just the bottom of a shoe. The little person has one there too. So if you want to turn that into a witch, here goes. Take your black, make sure you have enough. Add some of your blue, and why? Because her hat is very close to the, it's Payne's Gray by the way, sorry. Because her hat is very close to the moon. So we want to be able to tell that. So you're going to put a line across the tip of the head, like that, and then make a triangle. It's very rudimentary stuff here, guys. There. And then from the middle of the hat back, you're going to put some wispy hair, so it looks like a bit of a witchy poo. And then you're going to come down and make her, don't paint a whole face, just leave like a little bit of a round spot and make the cloak. Now I'm going straight in with the blue. We'll just act like highlights a bit. So the pumpkin faces, I'll just do this one to show you quickly. I went in with some, excuse me, burnt sienna. And the eyes. So one trick about using small brushes, you need enough water. So there's one eye. This is on the photo that that I drew out, so if you want to see it, you could go to the end of the video and it'll be there. In this one, I made it look like there was a candle inside, so it's very light yellow inside here, in lemon yellow, and then on right around the edges I just did the orange, and then around that I did the burnt sienna. So now I'm going to add some pumpkin lines with the burnt sienna. I'm adding some burnt sienna to my blue, and then I'm just going to paint some stripes along this, so it's going to look like the stem. And I'm going to do the same thing with this little stem over here, except I'm going to do it in green. When you use a small brush, make sure that you dry off the ferrule and just the tip there of your brush, because if the water comes down while you're working at a 90-degree angle, it's not very fun. And I think aside from some fiddling around, I think we're done here. I'm just going to add a bit more of a shadow here. Very watery, because I don't want to overdo it. I forgot that my my labels are not on there anymore. Nice shadow here. And some grasses. Maybe I'll put some nice grass, because it is sitting in grass, right? And this one is not. There's no grass here. So, and then the farther away you go, you can just put a little, if you want, you can decorate your grass. If you don't worry about it. So I hope you enjoyed this tiny little project. I know it was a bit long, but it's kind of fun. And in the spirit, just keep going. Just keep adding some depth to your painting by adding darker colors, and don't cover up all your lights though, and just have a good time with this. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel, and also leave me a comment or two. I love it. I just love to hear from you. Happy watercoloring. Bye bye.